Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. The sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as Detective Ray Holloway pulled into his driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel beneath his tires marking the end of another grueling day. At 42, Ray had seen enough darkness in his 15 years with the force to know that evil often wore familiar faces. What he hadn't expected was to find it wearing his wife's face. Ray had built his life on principles as solid as the oak trees that lined Maple Street. Born to a single mother who cleaned offices at night to keep food on the table, he'd learned early that respect was earned through action, not words. His military service in Afghanistan had taught him patience and precision, qualities that served him well both as a detective and as a father to his two children. The house before him was a testament to those principles. Every board of the wraparound porch had been measured twice and cut once. Every flower bed had been planned and planted with care. This wasn't just a house. It was his fortress, his sanctuary, the place where he'd promised to protect his family from the world's cruelties. His 15-year-old son, Danny, inherited Ray's methodical nature, but channeled it into woodworking rather than law enforcement. The boy had spent countless hours in the garage workshop Ray had built, learning to shape wood with the same precision his father used to shape investigations. Danny's latest project had consumed 3 weeks of after-school time and weekend hours, a treehouse for his 8-year-old sister Lily's birthday. Ray remembered the pride in Danny's voice when he described his plans. It's going to have a rope ladder, Dad, and a pulley system for bringing stuff up. I even designed a little window box where Lily can plant flowers. The boy had shown Ray detailed sketches, measurements calculated to the quarter inch. It was the kind of project that would have made Ray's own father proud, if he'd known the man. As Ray approached his front door, he expected to find the usual evening chaos. Lily's homework spread across the kitchen table, Danny's tools cleaned and organized in the garage, and his wife Brenda probably on her phone, as she'd been more frequently lately. Instead, he found something that made his blood run cold. In the backyard, where Danny's treehouse should have stood proudly in the old maple tree, lay a pile of splintered wood and broken dreams. The structure had been systematically dismantled, each board sawed apart with deliberate precision. This wasn't an accident or a storm's damage. This was intentional destruction. Brenda stood beside the wreckage, still holding the handsaw that had been Ray's father-in-law's. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her green eyes held a coldness Ray had never seen before. At 38, she maintained the appearance that had first caught his attention at a police charity fundraiser 12 years ago. But something fundamental had changed beneath the surface. Brenda, what the hell happened here? Ray's voice carried the controlled fury of a man trained to remain calm under pressure. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Ray saw something flicker across her expression. Not guilt or remorse, but something closer to satisfaction. Our son needs to grow up, Ray. This will humble him. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. He looked at the destruction again, seeing not just broken wood, but the destruction of his son's trust, his pride, his birthday surprise for his little sister. 3 weeks of work, countless hours of planning and building, reduced to kindling by his own mother. Where's Danny? Ray's question came out as barely more than a whisper. In his room. He's been up there since he saw what I did. Brenda's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she'd simply cleaned out a closet rather than destroyed a labor of love. Ray felt something shift inside him, a cold calculation replacing the initial shock. This wasn't the woman he'd married, the one who used to brag about Danny's projects to her friends. This was someone else entirely, someone who could look at her son's heartbreak and call it necessary. Why? The single word carried the weight of their entire marriage. Brenda's response chilled him to the bone. Because he's becoming too much like you, Ray. Too focused on building things, too interested in making others happy. He needs to learn that the world doesn't care about his feelings. Ray studied his wife's face, applying the same analytical skills he used on suspects. The micro-expressions, the body language, the way she avoided direct eye contact. Everything pointed to deception. But deception about what? As he climbed the stairs to check on Danny, Ray's mind was already working, processing the scene like a crime. The systematic destruction spoke of planning, not impulse. The timing, right before Lily's birthday, when the impact would be most devastating, suggested calculation. And Brenda's explanation felt rehearsed, like she prepared for this confrontation. Danny's door was closed, but Ray could hear the muffled sounds of his son's grief. He knocked softly. "Danny? It's Dad." The door opened to reveal a boy who looked like he'd aged years in a single afternoon. Danny's eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands still bore the calluses from 3 weeks of woodworking. "She destroyed it, Dad. 3 weeks of work, and she just tore it all down." Danny's voice cracked with the weight of his heartbreak. Ray pulled his son into a fierce hug, feeling the boy's shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. "I know, son. I know. I don't understand why she did it. I was so careful with everything. I double-checked all the measurements, used the techniques you taught me. It was going to be perfect for Lily's birthday." Ray held his son tighter, his mind racing. Something was wrong here, something deeper than a mother's misguided attempt at life lessons. The Brenda he'd married would never have done this. She'd been proud of Danny's projects, had even helped him with some of his earlier builds. "Dad!" Danny pulled back, looking up at his father with eyes that held too much hurt for a 15-year-old. "What's going to happen now?" Ray met his son's gaze with steady resolve. "Now, we're going to find out what's really going on, and then we're going to fix it." That night, after Danny had finally fallen asleep and Lily was tucked safely in her bed, Ray sat in his study, staring at the case files spread across his desk. But his mind wasn't on the robbery case he was supposed to be reviewing. Instead, he was thinking about the expression on Brenda's face when she'd explained her actions. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of suspects who believed they were smarter than the detective questioning them. It was the look of someone who thought they'd covered their tracks perfectly. Ray opened his laptop and began typing, his fingers finding the keys with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. If Brenda thought she could destroy his son's trust and his family's peace without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. The investigation would start tomorrow. Tonight he would plan. Chapter 2. The Investigation. The next morning arrived with the artificial normalcy of a family breakfast table, but Ray could feel the tension crackling beneath the surface like electricity before a storm. Lily, still blissfully unaware of the treehouse's destruction, chattered excitedly about her upcoming birthday party while pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. Danny sat in sullen silence, his usual appetite replaced by the hollow look of someone whose faith had been shattered. Brenda moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, packing lunches and refilling coffee cups as if nothing had changed. But Ray noticed the subtle tells, the way she avoided eye contact with Danny, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking, the phone that never left her side. "Lily, sweetheart, why don't you go get your backpack?" Ray suggested, his voice carrying the gentle authority that had always worked with his daughter. As Lily skipped out of the room, Ray studied his wife's reflection in the kitchen window. Brenda was texting someone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. When she noticed Ray watching, she quickly pocketed the phone. "Work emergency," she explained, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ray nodded, filing the information away. Brenda worked as a real estate agent, a job that required her to be available to clients, but she'd never been secretive about her communications before. Another piece of the puzzle. After dropping the kids at school, Ray made his first stop at the office of Detective Lisa Chun, his partner for the past 3 years. Lisa was 10 years his junior, but had twice his street smarts when it came to reading people. She looked up from her computer as he entered their shared workspace. "You look like hell, Holloway." "Bad night." Ray poured himself coffee from the perpetually brewing pot that sustained the detective division. "Lisa, I need a favor." "Off the books." Her eyebrows rose. Lisa had worked with Ray long enough to know he didn't ask for favors lightly. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to run a background check on my wife." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Lisa's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Ray, what's going on?" He told her about the treehouse, about Brenda's cold explanation, about the way everything felt wrong. Lisa listened without interruption, her detective instincts engaged. Could be a mental health issue, she suggested carefully. Postpartum depression can manifest years later, especially with stress triggers. Ray shook his head. This felt calculated, Lisa, like she wanted to hurt Danny specifically. Okay, but why are you asking me to run a background check? You've been married to her for 12 years. You know her background. Do I? Ray pulled out his phone and showed Lisa a screenshot he'd taken of Brenda's recent call log. She's been getting calls from a number I don't recognize, multiple times a day for the past month. Lisa studied the screen, her expression growing more serious. Ray, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes the answers we find aren't the ones we wanted. Ray thought about Danny's broken expression, about Lily's upcoming birthday party, about the systematic destruction of something beautiful his son had created. I'm sure. Lisa's fingers flew across her keyboard. Within minutes, she had pulled up Brenda's information, employment records, financial history, social media activity. Most of it was exactly what Ray expected, but there were gaps, inconsistencies that made his detective instincts tingle. Ray, look at this. Lisa pointed to a series of cash deposits in Brenda's personal account. These started about 6 weeks ago. Small amounts, but regular. And they don't match her real estate commission schedule. Ray studied the financial records. Brenda had always been meticulous about money, a trait born from growing up in a family that struggled financially. But these deposits suggested income she hadn't disclosed. There's something else, Lisa continued, pulling up another screen. That phone number you showed me? It's registered to a Trevor Kowalski. He's 34, works in construction, and has a record. Ray felt his stomach drop. What kind of record? Domestic violence. 2 convictions, 1 dismissed on a technicality. Most recent was 18 months ago. The room seemed to spin around Ray. This wasn't just about infidelity. Brenda was involved with someone who had a history of violence. The thought of this man anywhere near his children made Ray's blood run cold. I need everything you can find on this Trevor Kowalski, Ray said, his voice deadly calm. Lisa hesitated. Ray, I know what you're thinking, but you can't handle this like a case. This is your family. No, Ray corrected, his eyes hard as steel. This is exactly like a case. Someone is threatening my family, and I'm going to find out who and why. The rest of the morning was spent building a profile on Trevor Kowalski. He was a construction worker who specialized in home renovations, which explained how he might have met Brenda through her real estate work. He had a history of relationships that ended badly, often with restraining orders involved. He lived in a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of town and drove a beat-up pickup truck that had been reported stolen twice, but never prosecuted. By lunch, Ray had Trevor's address, his work schedule, and a list of places he frequented. He also had something else, a growing certainty that the treehouse destruction was part of something larger. Ray, I've got to ask, Lisa said as they reviewed the information. What are you planning to do with all this? Ray looked at his partner, a woman who had become one of his closest friends over the years. I'm going to protect my family. And if Brenda is having an affair? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ray had been married to Brenda for 12 years, had built a life with her, had trusted her with his children's welfare. The thought of betrayal cut deep, but it was the thought of his children being exposed to danger that made his hands clench into fists. Then she's made her choice, Ray said quietly. And I'll make mine. That afternoon, Ray parked across the street from Trevor's apartment complex. The building was a 3-story structure that had seen better decades, with cracked paint and broken windows patched with cardboard. Trevor's truck was in the parking lot, which meant he was home. Ray settled in to wait, his patience honed by years of surveillance work. He didn't have to wait long. At 3:47 p.m., Brenda's car pulled into the parking lot. Ray watched his wife of 12 years step out of her sedan, look around nervously, and then walk quickly to the building's entrance. She had a key. The sight of his wife entering another man's apartment with her own key hit Ray like a physical blow. This wasn't a recent development. Brenda had been seeing Trevor long enough to have a key to his place. The timeline suddenly made sense. The cash deposits, the secretive phone calls, the sudden change in her behavior toward Danny, it all pointed to a relationship that had been going on for months, possibly longer. Ray sat in his car for 2 hours, watching the building, his mind working through the implications. When Brenda finally emerged, her hair was disheveled and her clothes wrinkled. She looked around the parking lot again before getting in her car, but she didn't see Ray parked in the shadow of an overpass. As he followed her car at a distance, Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Dad, when will you be home? I want to talk about the treehouse." Ray's jaw tightened. His son was still processing the destruction of his project, still looking for answers that made sense. Meanwhile, his mother was betraying their family with a man who had a history of violence. The drive home gave Ray time to plan. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he had made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't confront Brenda directly. Instead, he would give her exactly what she seemed to want, a chance to reveal her true nature completely. That evening, Ray sat with Danny in the garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials that had been meant for future projects. "Dad, why did Mom really destroy the treehouse?" Danny asked, running his fingers over a piece of sandpaper. Ray looked at his son, this boy who had inherited his methodical nature and his desire to build rather than destroy. "Sometimes, son, people change. And sometimes we have to accept that the people we thought we knew were never who we believed them to be." Danny nodded slowly, understanding more than Ray wished he had to. "What are we going to do?" Ray put his hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility and the cold edge of determination. "We're going to find out the truth. All of it. And then we're going to decide what kind of family we want to be." That night, after everyone was asleep, Ray sat in his study and began making a list. Names, dates, financial records, phone numbers, everything he would need to uncover the full extent of Brenda's betrayal. He had spent 15 years learning how to investigate crimes and bring criminals to justice. Now he would apply those same skills to his own life. And when he was done, everyone involved would understand that Detective Ray Holloway was not a man who forgave betrayal, especially when it threatened his children. The investigation was just beginning. Chapter 3, The Setup. 2 weeks of methodical surveillance had given Ray a complete picture of his wife's double life, and the clarity was both devastating and liberating. Brenda had been seeing Trevor Kowalski for 4 months, meeting him 3 times a week at his apartment, while supposedly showing houses to clients. More damning, she had been taking Danny and Lily to McDonald's on Fridays, then leaving them in the car while she went upstairs to Trevor's apartment for 20-minute encounters that she timed to the minute. The thought of his children sitting in a car in that dangerous neighborhood while their mother betrayed their family made something cold and hard settle in Ray's chest. This wasn't just adultery, it was child endangerment. And Ray had documented every instance. Lisa had continued helping with the unofficial investigation, though she'd grown increasingly concerned about Ray's mental state. "You've been different these past 2 weeks, she observed as they sat in their squad car during a routine patrol. "Colder, more focused. It's like you're planning something." Ray kept his eyes on the street ahead. "I'm planning to protect my family. From what I've seen, your family is already broken, partner. The question is what you're going to do about it." Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." He showed the message to Lisa, who checked her watch. "It's 4:30 in the afternoon. Kind of early to be working late, isn't it?" Ray started the engine. "Want to take a drive?" They parked outside Trevor's apartment complex, just as Brenda's car pulled into the lot. Today was different, though. Instead of going straight to the building, Brenda waited in her car. After 5 minutes, Trevor emerged from the building and approached her vehicle. Ray watched through binoculars as they had what appeared to be an intense conversation. "Body language says they're arguing," Lisa observed, studying the scene through her own binoculars. "She's gesturing a lot, and he's leaning away from her." The argument continued for 10 minutes before Trevor threw up his hands and walked back to the building. Brenda sat in her car for another 5 minutes before driving away. She didn't go upstairs. "Trouble in paradise," Lisa murmured. "You think she's trying to break it off?" Ray lowered his binoculars. "I think she's trying to manage the situation. But she doesn't know that I know." That evening, Ray implemented the first phase of his plan. He arrived home at his usual time, greeted his children with genuine warmth, and acted like nothing had changed. At dinner, he even complimented Brenda on the pot roast, the same recipe she'd been making for years. "How was your day?" he asked, his tone casual and loving. Brenda looked up from her plate. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. Good. Busy. Showed 3 houses to a couple from Phoenix. Ray nodded, filing away the lie. That's great, honey. Any chance of sale? Maybe. They're thinking it over. After dinner, Ray helped Danny with his homework while Brenda gave Lily a bath. The domestic normalcy felt surreal, like acting in a play where only he knew the script. When Brenda's phone buzzed with a text, Ray noticed how quickly she grabbed it and how she angled the screen away from him. Everything okay? He asked. Just a client with questions about one of the properties. Another lie. Ray had seen the contact name, Trevor. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ray sat on the edge of the bed and watched Brenda apply her nightly moisturizer. She'd been doing this routine for 12 years, but now Ray noticed things he'd overlooked before. The way she avoided his eyes in the mirror, the slight tremor in her hands, the phone that never left her nightstand. Brenda, he said softly, is everything okay between us? She froze, her hand holding the moisturizer bottle. What do you mean? You seem distant lately. Distracted. I just want to make sure we're okay. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Ray saw something flicker across her expression. Guilt, fear, or maybe hope that he would give her an easy way out. We're fine, Ray. I'm just tired. Work has been stressful. Ray nodded and pulled her into a gentle embrace. I love you, Brenda. You know that, right? I love you, and I trust you completely. He felt her stiffen in his arms. I love you too, she whispered, but the words sounded hollow. The next morning, Ray put the second phase of his plan into motion. He called in a personal day and, after dropping the kids at school, drove to the office of a private investigator he'd worked with on several cases. Mike Torres was a former cop who specialized in domestic investigations, and he owed Ray a favor from a case that had gone sideways 2 years earlier. Ray Holloway, Mike said, looking up from his desk with genuine pleasure. What brings you to my little corner of paradise? Ray sat down across from Mike's cluttered desk. I need help with a personal matter. Mike's expression grew serious. What kind of personal matter? Ray laid out the entire situation. The treehouse, the surveillance, the evidence of Brenda's affair. Mike listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. So what do you need from me? Mike asked when Ray finished. I need you to approach Trevor Kowalski. Tell him you're a friend of Brenda's, that you're concerned about her marriage, and that you want to help her leave her husband. See what he tells you. Mike raised an eyebrow. You want me to pose as Brenda's ally? I want to know how deep this goes, how long they've been planning this, whether they've discussed my children, my job, my finances. I want to know if they're just having an affair or if they're planning something more. Mike studied Ray's face. And what are you planning to do with that information? Ray met his gaze steadily. I'm planning to protect my family. Ray, you're a good cop and a good man. Don't let this situation turn you into something you're not. Ray stood up, his decision made. Maybe who I am isn't who I need to be anymore. 3 days later, Mike called with his report. He'd met with Trevor at a bar near the construction site where he worked. Trevor had been eager to talk, especially after Mike bought him several drinks. Ray, you're not going to like what I found out, Mike said over the phone. Tell me. Trevor says Brenda's been complaining about you for months, calling you controlling, saying you don't appreciate her, claiming you're more interested in your job than your family. He also says she's been asking him to be patient while she figures out how to leave you. Ray felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. What else? She's been telling him that she's afraid of you, that you have a temper, that you've threatened her. She's been building a case for why she needs to leave and possibly why she might need a restraining order. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. Brenda wasn't just having an affair. She was laying the groundwork to paint him as an abusive husband. With his job in law enforcement, such accusations could destroy his career and his custody rights. There's more, Mike continued. Trevor mentioned that Brenda has been asking questions about your schedule, your cases, your firearms. She's been gathering information. Ray's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of information? The kind that could be used to hurt you professionally. Ray, I think they're planning something more than just a divorce. After hanging up, Ray sat in his car in the police station parking lot, his mind racing. Brenda wasn't just betraying him. She was systematically destroying his life. The treehouse incident suddenly made perfect sense. She was trying to provoke him into an angry response that she could use as evidence of his abusive nature. Ray looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw a man who had reached a crossroads. He could continue playing the role of the unsuspecting husband, gathering evidence until he had enough to expose Brenda's plan. Or he could take a different approach entirely. Ray Holloway had spent 15 years bringing criminals to justice through the system. But sometimes the system wasn't enough. Sometimes justice required a more personal touch. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. By the time he was finished, he had set in motion a plan that would give Brenda and Trevor exactly what they seemed to want: a chance to destroy Detective Ray Holloway. The only problem was, Ray had no intention of being destroyed. Instead, he was going to find out just how far they were willing to go. And then he was going to show them what real consequences looked like. The game was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Trap. Ray's plan required precise timing and the manipulation of variables that would make Brenda and Trevor feel confident enough to reveal their true intentions. Over the next week, he carefully orchestrated a series of events designed to create the perfect opportunity for them to make their move. First, he arranged for a high-profile case to land on his desk. A home invasion robbery that would require him to work late hours and be away from home more frequently. He made sure Brendan knew about the case's demands, complaining loudly about the overtime and the stress it was causing him. "I'm sorry, honey," he said one evening as he gathered his case files. "This robbery case is consuming everything. The captain wants it solved yesterday, and I'm running out of leads." Brenda looked up from her phone, where she'd been texting someone. "How long do you think it will take?" "Could be weeks. I might have to work weekends, maybe even travel to interview witnesses in other cities." Ray watched his wife's face carefully. Instead of the disappointment he would have expected, he saw something else: anticipation. Brenda was already calculating how to use his absence to her advantage. "Well, do what you need to do," she said, her tone supportive but her eyes calculating. "The kids and I will manage." That night, Ray's phone rang at 2 a.m. The caller ID showed Trevor's number. "Hello." Ray answered, his voice groggy with fake sleep. Heavy breathing on the other end, then silence. "Hello, is someone there?" The line went dead. Ray smiled in the darkness. They were testing him, trying to see if he was really asleep or if he was suspicious. Phase 1 of their plan, whatever it was, had begun. The next morning, Ray installed hidden cameras in his house. Small, wireless devices that would record everything and upload to a secure server. He placed them strategically in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, but not in the bedrooms. He wasn't interested in voyeurism. He wanted evidence of planning and conspiracy. 3 days later, Mike Torres called with an update from his continued surveillance of Trevor. "Ray, they're accelerating their timeline. Trevor was at the hardware store yesterday, buying some interesting items: zip ties, duct tape, and a prepaid cell phone." Ray felt his blood run cold. "What kind of prepaid phone?" "The kind you use when you don't want calls traced back to you." "Ray, I think they're planning something for this weekend." Ray checked his calendar. This weekend was Lily's birthday party, the one that was supposed to feature Danny's treehouse. Brenda had been planning the party for weeks, had invited Lily's entire class and their parents. It would be the perfect time for something to go wrong. "Mike, I need you to follow Trevor this weekend. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, everything he does." "What about you?" Ray looked at his reflection in his office window. "I'm going to be exactly where they expect me to be." Friday evening, Ray came home with flowers for Brenda and a new video game for Danny. He played the part of the devoted husband and father, helping with party preparations and asking about the weekend schedule. "The party starts at noon," Brenda said, arranging decorations in the living room. "Most of the parents are staying, so it'll be a full house." "I wish I could be here," Ray said, injecting genuine regret into his voice. "But this case is breaking open. I might have to work all weekend." Brenda's face showed fake disappointment. "Lily will be crushed. I'll try to make it back for the cake, but don't count on it." That night, Ray packed an overnight bag and made a show of leaving early Saturday morning. He kissed Brenda goodbye and hugged his children, then drove to a hotel across town where he checked in under a false name. From there, he He could monitor the cameras in his house and coordinate with Mike's surveillance of Trevor. The birthday party began at noon, and Ray watched through the hidden cameras as his house filled with children and parents. Brenda played the role of the perfect hostess, but Ray noticed how often she checked her phone and how she kept looking toward the backyard where the treehouse debris had been cleared away. At 1:30 p.m., Brenda announced that she needed to run to the store for more ice cream. She would be back in 20 minutes. Ray watched her leave, then switched to Mike's surveillance feed. Trevor was parked 2 blocks away from Ray's house, waiting. Instead of going to the store, Brenda drove to Trevor's location. Ray watched through Mike's telephoto lens as they had another intense conversation. This time, Trevor handed Brenda something, a small package that she quickly put in her purse. When Brenda returned to the party, she was carrying ice cream and acting like nothing had happened. But Ray had seen the package, and he had a good idea what it contained. The party continued for another hour. Children played games, parents made small talk, and Lily opened her presents with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. When she asked about her special treehouse surprise, Brenda's face darkened. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. The treehouse, it wasn't safe." Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions to protect the people they love. Ray watched his daughter's face fall and felt the cold calculation in his chest grow even colder. Brenda was manipulating his children, using their emotions as weapons in her war against him. After the party ended and the guests left, Ray watched Brenda put the children to bed early, claiming they were tired from all the excitement. Once Danny and Lily were asleep, she retrieved the package from her purse and made a phone call. "It's done," she said into the phone. "He's at the hotel, working on his case. The children are asleep. You can come over now." Ray switched to the exterior cameras and watched Trevor's truck pull into his driveway. His wife's lover was entering his house, walking through the door where Ray's children slept, sitting on the furniture Ray had bought, breathing the air in the sanctuary Ray had built for his family. But instead of rage, Ray felt only cold satisfaction. They were giving him everything he needed. Trevor entered through the back door, using a key Brenda had obviously provided. The two of them sat at Ray's kitchen table, and Brenda opened the package Trevor had given her earlier. Inside was a small glass vial containing a clear liquid. "Are you sure this will work?" Brenda asked, holding the vial up to the light. "My buddy swears by it," Trevor replied. "2 drops in his coffee, and he'll be out for hours. Long enough for us to set up the scene." Ray's blood turned to ice. They weren't just planning to frame him for domestic violence. They were planning to drug him and stage something that would destroy his life completely. "What about the kids?" Brenda asked. "They'll be fine. They're young enough that they won't remember much, and by the time this is over, they'll be living with you full-time." Away from him, Ray watched his wife nod, accepting the plan to traumatize his children as a necessary sacrifice. This was the woman he'd married, the mother of his children, the person he'd trusted with his life and his heart. "When do we do it?" Brenda asked. "Tomorrow night. He'll come home tired from his case. You'll make him dinner, and we'll put this in his coffee. While he's unconscious, I'll rough you up a little. Nothing serious, just enough to make it look real. Then we call 911 and report that he attacked you. With his job and his access to weapons, they'll have to take it seriously." Ray felt his hands clench into fists. Not only were they planning to destroy his career and take his children away, but Trevor was planning to assault Brenda to make their story believable. The casual way they discussed traumatizing Danny and Lily, the cold calculation behind their plan, the complete lack of regard for anyone's welfare except their own. It revealed who they really were beneath their masks. Ray had seen enough. He drove back to his house, parking 2 blocks away and approaching through the neighbor's backyard. The hidden cameras had given him everything he needed to know. Now it was time to turn the tables. He slipped through his own back door, moving with the silent precision he'd learned in the military. Trevor and Brenda were still in the kitchen, finalizing their plans. Ray could hear their voices as he crept up the stairs to check on his children. Danny and Lily were both sleeping peacefully, unaware that their mother was downstairs planning to destroy their family. Ray looked at their innocent faces and felt something inside him crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. He crept back downstairs and listened to the final details of their plan. Tomorrow night, they would drug him, stage a domestic violence scene, and call the police. Brenda would get full custody of the children, Ray would lose his job and possibly face criminal charges, and Trevor would move in to play stepfather to Danny and Lily. Ray had heard enough. He slipped back outside and returned to his hotel, where he spent the rest of the night planning his response. By morning, he had a plan that would give Trevor and Brenda exactly what they wanted, a chance to destroy Detective Ray Holloway. The only difference was Ray would be controlling every aspect of their success. Chapter 5. The Revelation. Sunday morning brought rain and the kind of gray skies that matched Ray's mood perfectly. He sat in his hotel room, surrounded by printed screenshots from his hidden cameras, audio recordings from Mike's surveillance, and a detailed timeline of Brenda and Trevor's conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, but Ray wasn't interested in simply exposing them. He wanted them to experience the same devastation they had planned for him. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. "Hope the case is going well. Miss you. The kids are asking when you'll be home." He stared at the message, marveling at his wife's ability to maintain the pretense even now. She was asking when he'd be home so she could finalize the timing of his destruction. Ray typed back, "Should be home around 6 p.m. Looking forward to a quiet evening with my family." The response came quickly. "I'll make your favorite dinner. We need to talk about some things." Ray smiled grimly. She was setting up the final scene, preparing to serve him the drug coffee that would render him helpless while they staged their elaborate lie. But Ray had no intention of being anyone's victim. At noon, Ray drove to the office where Lisa was catching up on paperwork. She looked up as he entered, immediately noticing his expression. "You look like a man who's made a decision," she observed. Ray sat down across from her desk and laid out everything. The surveillance footage, the audio recordings, the planned drugging, and false accusations. Lisa listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "Jesus, Ray, they were really going to destroy you. They still think they are." Ray pulled out his phone and showed her Brenda's latest text. "Tonight's the night." Lisa studied the evidence spread across her desk. "You have enough here to arrest them both. Conspiracy, attempted assault, child endangerment. They'd both go away for years." Ray shook his head. "Prison is too easy. They'd serve their time, get out, and move on with their lives. I want them to understand what it feels like to have everything you've built systematically destroyed. What are you planning?" Ray stood up and began pacing. "Brenda wants to paint me as an abusive husband who can't control his temper. Trevor wants to play the hero who rescues her from the dangerous cop. They've created elaborate fiction about who I am and what I've done. So I'm going to let them live in that fiction." Lisa frowned. "I don't understand." Ray sat back down, his eyes cold and calculating. "Tonight, I'm going to give them exactly what they expect. I'm going to come home angry, frustrated, looking like a man on the edge. I'm going to drink the coffee Brenda serves me, but not before switching it with coffee from my own thermos. Then I'm going to pretend to pass out. That's incredibly dangerous, Ray. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong because you're going to be watching. You and Mike will have the house surrounded. The moment Trevor lays a hand on Brenda to create their fake evidence, you'll have them for conspiracy and assault. But more importantly, I'll have them on record admitting what they've done." Lisa shook her head. "Ray, this is vigilante justice. Let the system handle it." Ray looked at his partner, this woman who had become like a sister to him over the years they'd worked together. "Lisa, they were planning to traumatize my children to cover their tracks. They were going to destroy my career, my reputation, and my family. The system will give them a few years in prison. I want them to lose everything, the way they planned to take everything from me." That evening, Ray drove home through the rain, his mind focused on the performance he was about to give. He parked in his driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house he'd built, the life he'd created, the family that was about to be torn apart by betrayal. He entered through the front door, calling out to his children. Danny and Lily ran to greet him, and for a moment, Ray allowed himself to feel the pure joy of their love. These children had done nothing wrong, yet they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of their mother forever. "How was your weekend, Dad?" Danny asked, studying his father's face with a perceptiveness that reminded Ray so much of himself. "Challenging, son, but we're close to solving the case." Brenda appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing the blue dress Ray had bought her for their anniversary. She looked beautiful, radiant even, like a woman preparing for a celebration. "Welcome home, honey. You look exhausted." Ray allowed fatigue to show in his posture, his expression. "It's been a long few days. I'm just glad to be home. Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some coffee." Ray nodded and moved to his favorite chair in the living room. Through the window, he could see Mike's van parked across the street, and he knew Lisa was positioned in the backyard. Everything was in place. Brenda brought him the coffee in his favorite mug, the one Danny had made in art class years ago. The irony wasn't lost on Ray. She was using their son's gift to deliver what she thought would be his destruction. "Thank you," Ray said, accepting the mug. The coffee smelled normal, but Ray knew it contained enough sedative to render him unconscious for hours. "Ray, before you drink that, we need to talk." Ray looked up at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in months. The woman standing before him was a stranger wearing Brenda's face, someone who could look at their children's drawings on the refrigerator while planning to traumatize them for personal gain. "What about?" Brenda sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap like a child preparing to confess a minor transgression. "I haven't been happy, Ray, for a long time now." Ray took a sip of the coffee, making sure she saw him swallow. "What do you mean?" "I mean our marriage. Your job consumes everything. You're never here, and when you are, you're thinking about your cases. I feel like I'm married to a ghost." Ray took another sip, playing his part perfectly. "I work hard to provide for this family, Brenda. Everything I do is for you and the kids. But what about what I need? What about my happiness?" Ray felt the bitter irony of the conversation. Here was his wife, preparing to drug him and destroy his life, lecturing him about her happiness. "What are you saying, Brenda?" She leaned forward, her green eyes bright with what looked like genuine emotion. "I'm saying I want a divorce, Ray. I want to take the kids and start over somewhere else." Ray stared at her, allowing shock and hurt to show on his face. "A divorce? Brenda, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I can change my schedule." "No." Her voice was firm, decisive. "I've already made up my mind. I've been seeing someone else, Ray. Someone who understands me, who puts me first." Ray took another drink of the coffee, then set the mug down with shaking hands. "You've been having an affair? I've been finding myself. For the first time in years, I feel alive, appreciated, loved." Ray stood up, swaying slightly as if the drugs were beginning to take effect. "Who is he? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm done pretending to be happy in a marriage that died years ago." Ray stumbled, catching himself on the arm of his chair. I don't feel good." Brenda's expression changed, concern replacing the coldness. But Ray recognized it as the concern of someone worried their plan might be failing, not the worry of a wife for her husband's well-being. "Maybe you should sit down," she suggested. Ray collapsed back into his chair, his eyes rolling back as if he were losing consciousness. Through nearly closed lids, he watched Brenda pull out her phone and send a text. 5 minutes later, Trevor entered through the back door. Ray heard his footsteps, heard him whisper to Brenda. "Is he out?" "I think so. How much time do we have?" "Enough. You sure you're ready for this?" Ray listened as they moved around the living room, and he felt Trevor's presence looming over him. Through slitted eyes, he saw the man who had been planning to destroy his family, who had been meeting his wife while his children waited in the car. "Remember, you have to make it look real," Trevor whispered to Brenda. "A few bruises, maybe a split lip. Nothing too serious, but enough to be convincing." Ray heard Brenda's sharp intake of breath. "I know. Seeing him like this, it's harder than I thought it would be. You want a better life or not? You want to be free of him?" "Yes, I want to be free." Ray heard the sound of flesh hitting flesh, heard Brenda cry out softly. They were creating their fake evidence, staging the scene that would destroy his reputation and take his children away from him. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had revealed their true nature completely, and Ray had recorded every word. As Trevor prepared to hit Brenda again, Ray's eyes snapped open. "That's enough," he said quietly. Trevor spun around, shock written across his face. Brenda gasped, touching the red mark on her cheek where Trevor had struck her. Ray stood up smoothly, no longer pretending to be drugged. Both of you sit down. We need to have a real conversation. Trevor reached for something in his jacket, but Ray was faster. Years of police work had kept him in excellent shape, and his military training had never truly left him. He grabbed Trevor's wrist and twisted, sending whatever he'd been reaching for clattering across the floor. I said sit down. The authority in Ray's voice, the cold promise of violence if they didn't comply, made both Trevor and Brenda sink onto the couch like chastened children. Ray walked to the kitchen and returned with his own coffee mug, the one he'd been drinking from all along. He held up Brenda's drugged coffee next to it. Interesting conversation you two were having. Very illuminating. Brenda's face had gone white. Ray, I can explain. No need. I heard everything. The plan to drug me, the fake domestic violence, the custody grab. All of it. Ray pulled out his phone and played back a recording of their conversation from just minutes earlier. Their voices filled the room, discussing how to make Brenda's injuries look convincing, how to traumatize the children, how to destroy Ray's life. The question now, Ray continued, is what we're going to do about it. Trevor found his voice. You can't use that recording. It's illegal wiretapping. Ray smiled, and the expression was colder than anything Trevor had ever seen. You're absolutely right, which is why we're not going to court. We're going to handle this a different way. Ray walked to the window and signaled to the street. Within seconds, Lisa and Mike entered through the front door, followed by two uniformed officers. Gentlemen, meet my wife Brenda and her boyfriend Trevor. They've just confessed to conspiracy, attempted assault, and child endangerment. Brenda looked around wildly. Ray, please. Think about the children. Think about our family. Ray's expression didn't change. I'm thinking about them. I'm thinking about how you were willing to traumatize them to cover your tracks. I'm thinking about how you brought them to his apartment and left them in the car while you betrayed our family. I'm thinking about how you destroyed Danny's treehouse to provoke me into giving you evidence for your lies. Trevor tried to stand, but Mike pushed him back down. You think you're so smart, cop? You think this is over? Ray walked over to Trevor, close enough that the other man could see the deadly calm in his eyes. No, Trevor, this is just the beginning. See, I know all about your history. The domestic violence charges, the restraining orders, the women you've hurt. And now I have evidence of you planning to assault my wife and frame me for it. Ray turned to Brenda, who was crying now, though he couldn't tell if the tears were real or part of another performance. And you, Brenda, you're going to find out what it's like to lose everything you've built. Your real estate license, your reputation, your relationship with our children. All of it. Ray, please, Brenda begged. I made a mistake. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, Ray said quietly. We can't, because this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. A deliberate, calculated plan to destroy me and traumatize our children. And I don't forgive people who hurt my family. As Lisa read Trevor his rights and the uniformed officers prepared to take him away, Ray knelt down to Brenda's level. You wanted to be free of me, he said softly. Congratulations. You got your wish. The last thing Brenda saw before the police car doors closed was Ray standing in the doorway of their home. No longer the man she had married, but someone else entirely. Someone who had looked into the abyss of betrayal and had chosen to stare back without blinking. The revelation was complete. Now came the reckoning. Chapter 6, The Consequences. The next 72 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction, with Ray conducting every movement from behind the scenes. While Trevor sat in county lockup on charges of conspiracy and attempted assault, and Brenda had been released on bond with a restraining order preventing her from taking the children out of state, Ray was methodically dismantling the life she had built alongside their marriage. Monday morning found Ray in the office of Margaret Stern, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Margaret was a woman in her 50s who had built her reputation on destroying unfaithful spouses with surgical precision. Detective Holloway, she said, reviewing the files Ray had brought. I've seen a lot of betrayal in my 30 years of practice, but this is remarkably comprehensive. Your wife and her accomplice documented their own conspiracy. Ray sat across from her mahogany desk, his expression calm, but his eyes burning with cold determination. I want full custody of my children. I want the house, the cars, everything. I want her to leave this marriage with nothing but the knowledge that her choices destroyed her family." Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "The recordings are inadmissible in court, but the conspiracy charges give us leverage. Your wife's attorney will recommend she accept whatever terms we offer rather than risk a lengthy court battle while facing criminal charges." "What about her real estate license?" "I've already filed complaints with the state licensing board. Conspiracy to commit fraud, moral turpitude, conduct unbecoming a professional. Even if the criminal charges get reduced, she'll never sell real estate again." Ray nodded. "And Trevor? Mr. Kowalski is looking at 3 to 5 years, especially with his prior domestic violence convictions. His construction company will fold without him, and he'll be bankrupt before he gets out of prison." That afternoon, Ray picked up Danny and Lily from school personally, something he hadn't been able to do regularly due to his work schedule. Both children sensed that something fundamental had changed in their family dynamic, but Ray wasn't ready to explain the full scope of their mother's betrayal. "Dad, where's Mom?" Lily asked as they drove home. "She was supposed to pick us up today." Ray looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this innocent child who had been used as a pawn in her mother's game. "Your mom is dealing with some problems right now, sweetheart. She's going to be staying somewhere else for a while." Danny, more perceptive at 15, studied his father's profile. "Is this about the treehouse?" Ray met his son's eyes in the mirror. "It's about a lot of things, son. Things that have been building for a long time." That evening, Ray sat both children down in the living room where, just days earlier, Brenda had planned to drug him and stage her assault. The irony of the location wasn't lost on him. "Kids, I need to tell you something important about your mother and our family." He chose his words carefully, explaining that Brenda had been lying to them, that she had been seeing another man, and that she had planned to take them away from their home and their father. He didn't mention the drugging or the stage violence. Some truths were too heavy for children to carry. Lily cried, not fully understanding, but sensing the permanence of the change. Danny's reaction was different, a cold anger that reminded Ray uncomfortably of himself. "She destroyed my tree house because she wanted you to get angry," Danny said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, son. She used us. Our feelings, our love for her. She used all of it as weapons against you." Ray pulled both children close. "I'm sorry you have to learn this about your mother. I'm sorry your family is broken." Danny looked up at his father with eyes older than his years. "She broke it, Dad. Not you." Wednesday morning brought the first real consequence of Ray's methodical revenge. Brenda's real estate firm, Pinnacle Properties, fired her after the licensing board complaints became public. Her picture was removed from the company website. Her business cards were called, her office cleaned out by security. Ray received a text from her. "Ray, please. I've lost my job. I can't afford my apartment. Can we talk?" He showed the message to Lisa as they sat in their squad car during patrol. She's starting to understand that actions have consequences. How are the kids handling it? Ray thought about the conversation he'd had with Danny the night before. His son had asked pointed questions about the timeline of Brenda's affair, about the treehouse destruction, about the lies she'd told. Danny was processing the betrayal with the same analytical mind he'd inherited from Ray, and the conclusions he was reaching were hardening him in ways that broke Ray's heart. Danny's angry, really angry. Lily's confused and hurt. They both feel betrayed, but they're handling it differently. Lisa studied her partner's profile. "And how are you handling it?" Ray was quiet for a long moment. "I feel like I failed them. Like I should have seen what Brenda was becoming. Should have protected them from this." "Ray, you didn't fail anybody. You were working to provide for your family while your wife was planning to destroy it. That's not your fault." Thursday brought Trevor's arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty to all charges despite the overwhelming evidence against him. Ray sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as the man who had planned to assault his wife and frame him for it tried to maintain his innocence. After the hearing, Trevor's attorney approached Ray in the hallway. "Detective, my client would like to discuss a plea arrangement." Ray studied the young lawyer, probably fresh out of law school, and trying to minimize the damage to his client. "What kind of arrangement?" "Mr. Kowalski is willing to testify against your wife in exchange for reduced charges. He's prepared to admit that the entire conspiracy was her idea, that she seduced him into participating." Ray felt a cold smile cross his face. Tell your client that I'm not interested in his testimony. Tell him that he's going to serve every day of his sentence. And when he gets out, he'll find that his reputation follows him wherever he goes. Friday afternoon, Ray received a call from Margaret Stern. Brenda's attorney wanted to meet to discuss settlement terms. She's ready to capitulate, Margaret said. Full custody to you, minimal visitation rights for her. She keeps her personal belongings and her car. You keep everything else. She's desperate to avoid a trial while facing criminal charges. Ray thought about his children, about the home he'd built, about the life Brenda had tried to destroy. Set up the meeting. Saturday morning, Ray sat across from Brenda in a sterile conference room at Margaret's law firm. His wife looked like she'd aged years in the past week. Her auburn hair was unwashed, her designer clothes wrinkled, her green eyes rimmed with dark circles. Ray, she said as soon as she saw him. Thank you for coming. I know we can work this out. Ray didn't respond. He simply stared at the woman who had shared his bed for 12 years, who had borne his children, who had planned to drug him and destroy his life. Brenda's attorney cleared his throat. Detective Holloway, my client, is prepared to accept the custody and property arrangements as outlined. In exchange, she's hoping you might consider asking the prosecutor to reduce the charges against her. Ray leaned back in his chair. Brenda, do you remember what you said to me about the treehouse? You said Danny needed to be humbled. Brenda's face crumpled. Ray, I'm sorry. I was confused. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Ray interrupted. You were thinking very clearly. You had a plan, and you executed it step by step. You destroyed our son's project to provoke me. You gathered information about my job, my schedule, my weaknesses. You recruited a man with a history of violence to help you frame me. You were willing to traumatize our children to cover your tracks. Ray stood up, his decision made. You wanted me to be humble, Brenda. Instead, you're going to learn what that word really means. He walked toward the door, then turned back. By the way, Trevor's attorney approached me about a plea deal. He's willing to testify that the entire conspiracy was your idea in exchange for reduced charges. Brenda's face went white. Ray, no. Please. You chose this path, Brenda. Every step of the way, you chose betrayal over family, lies over truth, destruction over healing. Now you get to live with those choices. Ray left the conference room without looking back. In the hallway, Margaret caught up with him. She'll sign the papers, his attorney said. Today, she's terrified of facing trial alone while Trevor testifies against her. Ray nodded. Make sure the custody arrangement includes supervised visitation only. I don't trust her alone with my children. That evening, Ray sat in his backyard with Danny, looking at the spot where the treehouse had stood. His son was whittling a piece of wood with focused precision, his hands moving with practiced skill. What are you making? Ray asked. Danny held up the wood, revealing the rough shape of a small bird. Something for Lily. She's been sad about Mom. Ray watched his son work, seeing the care and patience in every cut. You know, we could build another treehouse. A better one. Danny looked up at his father. Would you help me? Every step of the way. As the sun set behind them, Ray felt something settling into place. Brenda and Trevor would face the consequences of their choices. His children would heal, supported by a father who would never betray their trust. And the life they built going forward would be stronger because it was founded on truth rather than lies. The consequences phase was complete. Now came the final reckoning. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. 6 months later, Ray stood in his backyard watching Danny put the finishing touches on the new treehouse. This structure was different from the first one, bigger, stronger, and built with the wisdom that comes from having learned hard lessons about trust and betrayal. Danny had insisted on using only new materials, refusing to salvage anything from the wreckage of his original project. I don't want any part of what she destroyed to be in this one, Danny had explained, and Ray understood completely. The treehouse had become more than just a birthday gift for Lily. It had become a symbol of their family's ability to rebuild, to create something beautiful from the ashes of what had been lost. Every board measured twice and cut once, every joint fitted with precision, every decision made together. Lily was now 9, and the past 6 months had been a journey of healing for her. She still asked about her mother sometimes, but the questions came less frequently. The supervised visits with Brenda had been awkward and painful, filled with stilted conversation and unspoken truths. Eventually, Brenda had stopped showing up altogether. "She's still our mom," Lily had said one evening after a missed visit. "But she's not the same person anymore." Ray had held his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom. "Sometimes people change, sweetheart. And sometimes we have to accept that the person we thought we knew was never really there." Danny, now 16, had processed his mother's betrayal with the same methodical approach he applied to his woodworking. He'd asked hard questions, demanded honest answers, and ultimately reached his own conclusions about the woman who had raised him. "I don't forgive her," he told Ray one night while they worked on the treehouse. "I understand why she did what she did. She was selfish and wanted what she wanted more than she wanted our family. But understanding doesn't mean forgiving." Ray had looked at his son, this young man who was becoming someone he could be proud of. "You don't have to forgive her, son. Forgiveness is something you give because you choose to, not because you're obligated to." The criminal cases had played out exactly as Ray had orchestrated. Trevor had indeed tried to cut a deal, testifying that Brenda had seduced him into the conspiracy and that the entire plan had been her idea. His testimony had been devastating, painting Brenda as a manipulative woman who used sex and false promises to convince him to participate in destroying her husband. Brenda's attorney had tried to argue that she was the victim of an abusive relationship with Trevor, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial records, the timeline of events, all of it pointed to a woman who had carefully planned the destruction of her family. In the end, Trevor received 4 years for conspiracy and attempted assault. Brenda received 3 years, suspended to 18 months with probation. Both were required to pay restitution to Ray for his legal fees and the costs of the investigation. But Ray's revenge had extended far beyond the courtroom. Brenda's real estate license was permanently revoked. Her employment history was now a matter of public record, making it nearly impossible for her to find work in any field requiring background checks. The apartment she'd rented had evicted her when the landlord learned about her criminal charges. She'd been forced to move back in with her elderly parents, a situation that had strained that relationship to the breaking point. More devastating was the social cost. Brenda's friends had abandoned her when the details of her conspiracy became public. The other parents at Lily's school avoided her during the brief period when she still had visitation rights. Her reputation in their small community was permanently destroyed. Trevor's construction company had folded while he was in prison. His employees had scattered to other jobs, and the equipment had been sold to pay debts. When he was eventually released, he would emerge to find that Ray had systematically contacted every construction company in the tri-state area, ensuring that Trevor's history of domestic violence and conspiracy charges followed him wherever he tried to work. Ray's revenge had been thorough, methodical, and absolutely devastating. He had given both Brenda and Trevor exactly what they had tried to give him: the complete destruction of their lives and reputations. Lisa had watched her partner's transformation over the months with a mixture of admiration and concern. Ray had become colder, more calculating, less inclined to give people the benefit of the doubt. He was still a good cop, perhaps even a better one, but something fundamental had changed in him. "You got what you wanted," she observed one afternoon as they finished paperwork on a domestic violence case. "They're both destroyed. Their lives are ruined. But what did it cost you?" Ray looked up from his files. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you become someone different, Ray. Harder, less trusting. The man I knew 6 months ago would have tried to find a way to save his marriage, to protect his wife even from herself. This version of you orchestrated her complete destruction without blinking." Ray was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "The man I was 6 months ago was naive, Lisa. He believed that people were fundamentally good, that love and trust were enough to protect his family. That man was weak. Was he? Or was he just human?" Ray closed his file and looked at his partner. That man would have forgiven Brenda. He would have gone to counseling, tried to understand what had driven her to betray him, maybe even taken her back eventually. And where would that have left Danny and Lily? Living with a mother who was willing to traumatize them for personal gain? watching their father accept betrayal as the price of keeping the family together. Lisa nodded slowly. So you chose to become someone else. I chose to become someone who protects his family no matter what the cost. That evening, Ray climbed up into the new treehouse with Lily. The structure was beautiful, with windows that caught the evening light and a small reading nook where his daughter could escape with her books. Danny had built it with love and care, and it showed in every detail. "Do you miss her, Daddy?" Lily asked, settling beside him with a book about dragons. Ray looked at his daughter, this beautiful child who had inherited her mother's green eyes, but, he hoped, none of her capacity for betrayal. "I miss who I thought she was, sweetheart, but the person I thought she was never really existed." Lily nodded with the acceptance that children sometimes show in the face of adult complexities. Danny says she made her choices, and now she has to live with them. Danny's right. Are you happy, Daddy? Without her? Ray considered the question carefully. Was he happy? He felt satisfied, vindicated, successful in protecting his children from further harm. But happiness? That was more complicated. "I'm content, Lily. I know that you and Danny are safe, that our family is strong, that no one can hurt us the way she did ever again. That's enough for me." Later that night, after both children were asleep, Ray sat in his study reviewing the final papers from his divorce. The settlement had been even more favorable than he'd hoped. Brenda had signed away all rights to the house, the cars, even her share of his police pension. In exchange, she'd avoided a lengthy trial that would have exposed even more devastating details about her conspiracy. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please, Ray. I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. I can't find work. I can't afford rent. I'm living in my car. Just this once, for the sake of what we once had. Please help me." Ray stared at the message for a long time. He could picture Brenda typing it, probably sitting in her car in some parking lot, desperate and broken, and finally understanding the full scope of what her choices had cost her. He deleted the message without responding. The next morning brought news that completed Ray's sense of justice. Margaret Stern called to inform him that Trevor had been attacked in prison by another inmate. He would survive, but the incident had taught him that even behind bars, his reputation preceded him. Apparently, conspiracy to frame a police officer doesn't make you popular in Gen Pop, Margaret observed dryly. Ray felt no satisfaction in Trevor's suffering, only a cold acknowledgement that actions have consequences. The man had chosen to involve himself in destroying Ray's family, and now he was learning what that choice really meant. As Ray drove to work that morning, he passed the apartment complex where Trevor used to live. It had been demolished to make way for a shopping center, erasing the last physical reminder of where Brenda had betrayed her family. At the office, Lisa was waiting with her case files for the day. She studied Ray's face as he settled at his desk. "You heard about Trevor," she said. "I heard." And Ray looked at his partner, this woman who had helped him uncover the truth about his wife's betrayal. And nothing. He made his choices, just like Brenda made hers. "I'm not responsible for the consequences they face." Lisa nodded, accepting his response, but still watching him with concern. "Ray, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Always. If Danny or Lily ever betrayed you the way Brenda did, would you destroy them too?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Ray was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the words but the implications behind them. "My children are different," he said finally. "They're part of me in a way Brenda never was. Their blood, their future, they're the best parts of who I am. I would do anything to protect them, including protecting them from their own mistakes. But would you forgive them?" Ray met Lisa's eyes steadily. "I would guide them, teach them, help them understand the consequences of their choices. But forgiveness? That would depend on what they did and whether they understood the harm they'd caused." Lisa nodded, not entirely satisfied with the answer, but understanding that it was the truth. That afternoon, Ray received a call from Danny's school. His son had gotten into a fight with another student who had made disparaging comments about Brenda. Danny had broken the other boy's nose and was facing suspension. Ray drove to the school immediately, finding Danny sitting in the principal's office with ice on his knuckles and defiance in his eyes. "He said Mom was a whore," Danny explained without preamble. "He said she got what she deserved, and that our whole family was trash. Ray looked at his son, seeing himself reflected in the boy's rigid posture and barely controlled anger. And you felt you had to defend her honor? Danny's expression flickered with uncertainty. She's still my mother. Ray sat down beside his son, choosing his words carefully. Danny, your mother made choices that hurt our family. The consequences she's facing are the result of those choices, not anything you or I did to her. You don't have to defend her actions, but you also don't have to carry her shame. Then why does it matter what people say about her? Ray studied his son's face, seeing the confusion and pain beneath the anger. It doesn't matter what they say about her. What matters is what you choose to do with your own life, your own reputation, your own character. You can't control what your mother did, but you can control who you become. Danny nodded slowly, processing the advice. Dad, do you think I'm like her? Like, am I going to end up hurting people the way she did? Ray pulled his son into a fierce hug. No, son, you're nothing like her. You build things, she destroyed them. You think about how your actions affect others. She only thought about herself. You have integrity, honor, and loyalty. Those are the qualities that will define who you become. That evening, as Ray tucked Lily into bed, she asked him a question that cut straight to the heart of everything that had happened. Daddy, when I grow up, how will I know if someone really loves me or if they're just pretending like Mommy was? Ray sat on the edge of her bed, looking down at this innocent child who had learned too young that love could be a lie. You'll know by their actions, sweetheart. People who really love you will protect you, support your dreams, and never ask you to lie for them. They'll be consistent, the same person in private as they are in public, and they'll never use your love as a weapon against you or anyone else. Lily nodded solemnly. Like you do with us? Like I do with you. Chapter 8, The Final Test. 1 year after the treehouse incident, Ray received an unexpected phone call that would test every principle he'd built his new life upon. The caller was Dr. Patricia Reeves, a psychiatrist at the state mental health facility. Detective Holloway, I'm calling about your ex-wife, Brenda. She's been a patient here for the past 3 months. Ray felt his blood run cold. What happened? She was found in her car with an empty bottle of sleeping pills. It was ruled a suicide attempt. She's been under psychiatric care since then, and she's been asking to see you and the children. Ray was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. How is she? Severely depressed, experiencing what we believe to be a complete psychological breakdown. She's been talking extensively about the choices she made, expressing what appears to be genuine remorse for her actions. And you're calling me because? Dr. Reeves hesitated. Detective, I'll be direct with you. Your ex-wife is consumed with guilt over what she did to your family. She speaks about you and the children constantly, and her recovery is being hindered by her belief that she's irredeemably destroyed the people she loves most. A visit from you, some indication of forgiveness, might be crucial to her healing. Ray thought about Brenda, this woman who had tried to destroy his life, now broken and hospitalized because she couldn't live with the consequences of her choices. Part of him felt a cold satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of complete destruction he had orchestrated. But another part, a part he thought he'd killed, felt something that might have been pity. I'll think about it, he told Dr. Reeves. That evening, Ray discussed the situation with Danny and Lily. Both children had mixed reactions to the news that their mother had tried to kill herself. Is she going to be okay? Lily asked, her green eyes wide with concern. The doctors think she will be, with proper treatment and time. Danny's response was colder. She made her choice, Dad. Just like you always say, actions have consequences. Ray studied his 16-year-old son, seeing his own philosophy reflected back at him with crystalline clarity. Was this what he had taught Danny? That people who made mistakes deserved no compassion, no possibility of redemption? Danny, do you think there's ever a situation where someone deserves a second chance? Danny considered the question seriously. I think people can change, but they have to prove it. And they have to understand that earning forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences. Lily looked between her father and brother. I think Mommy is sad because she knows she was wrong. Maybe if we told her we don't hate her, she would feel better. Ray was struck by his daughter's capacity for compassion, even after everything Brenda had done. It reminded him of who he used to be before betrayal had hardened his heart into something unforgiving. The next day, Ray drove to the mental health facility. The building was modern and clean, designed to feel more like a hospital than an asylum. But Ray could still sense the desperation that permeated places where broken minds came to heal. Dr. Reeves met him in the lobby, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who dealt with human suffering daily. Detective Holloway, thank you for coming. Before you see Brenda, I want you to understand her current mental state. She's fragile, volatile, and deeply ashamed of her actions. She's also convinced that you hate her and that her children will never forgive her. Ray followed the doctor down a hallway lined with artwork created by patients. Do you think she's genuinely remorseful, or is this manipulation? In my professional opinion, this is genuine remorse coupled with severe depression. She's not trying to manipulate you, detective. She's trying to find a reason to keep living. They stopped outside a door marked with Brenda's name. Through the small window, Ray could see his ex-wife sitting on a narrow bed, staring out the window at the facility's garden. She looked like a shadow of the woman he'd married. Thin, pale, her auburn hair now streaked with gray. I'll give you privacy, Dr. Reeves said, but I'll be nearby if you need anything. Ray entered the room, and Brenda looked up with eyes that were haunted and hollow. When she saw him, she began to cry. Not the manipulative tears he'd grown accustomed to, but the broken sobs of someone whose spirit had been shattered. Ray, she whispered. You came. Ray sat in the chair across from her bed, studying the woman who had tried to destroy his life. Dr. Reeves said you wanted to see me. Brenda wiped her eyes with a tissue, her hands shaking. I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix what I broke, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did. Ray remained silent, letting her speak. I was selfish, Ray. So incredibly selfish. I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy, that my feelings mattered more than our family, more than our children's security. I told myself lies about you, about our marriage, because it was easier than admitting I was choosing to betray the best man I'd ever known. Brenda's voice broke, and she had to pause to compose herself. The treehouse. God, Ray, I destroyed something beautiful that our son made with love, and I did it to hurt you. What kind of mother does that? What kind of person destroys their child's joy to serve their own agenda? Ray felt something shifting inside him, a crack in the ice that had formed around his heart. Why, Brenda? Why did you do it? She looked at him with eyes full of pain and self-awareness. Because I was weak. Because I was bored with my life, and instead of working to make it better, I chose to blame you for my unhappiness. Trevor made me feel exciting, desirable, like I was the center of someone's world. And I was so addicted to that feeling that I was willing to sacrifice everything for it. Ray leaned forward. Including our children's well-being. Including our children's well-being, she agreed, fresh tears streaming down her face. Ray, I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that losing you and Danny and Lily has taught me who I really was, a selfish, destructive person who took a beautiful family for granted. Ray was quiet for a long moment, processing her words and his own reaction to them. The woman sitting before him bore little resemblance to the cold, calculating person who had planned to drug him and stage her own assault. This was someone who had been broken by the consequences of her choices, who had learned too late what her actions had cost. What do you want from me, Brenda? She looked up at him with desperate hope. I want to know that someday, maybe years from now, you might be able to think of me without hatred. I want to know that you'll tell Danny and Lily that their mother loved them, even though she made terrible choices. I want to know that I haven't destroyed every good memory we ever shared. Ray stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where other patients walked slowly along winding paths. He thought about the years since the treehouse incident, about the cold satisfaction he'd felt as he systematically destroyed Brenda's life, about the person he'd become in pursuit of justice. He thought about Danny's hard edges, about Lily's questions about love and trust, about the way he'd taught his children that betrayal was unforgivable and that people didn't deserve second chances. He thought about the man he'd been before Brenda's betrayal, someone who believed in redemption, in the possibility of change, in the power of forgiveness to heal both the wounded and the one who had caused the wounds. Ray turned back to face his ex-wife. Brenda, I can't forgive you yet. Maybe I never will. What you did was unforgivable. Not just the affair, but the conspiracy, the willingness to traumatize our children, the systematic plan to destroy my life. Brenda nodded, accepting his words. But, Ray continued, I don't hate you anymore. Hate requires too much energy, and I'd rather spend that energy building a good life for Danny and Lily. Hope flickered in Brenda's eyes. The children, how are they? They're strong. They're healing. Danny built a new tree house for Lily, and it's beautiful. They're learning that people they love can disappoint them, but that doesn't mean they should stop believing in love itself. Ray moved toward the door. Brenda, I want you to get better. Not for me, not for us, but for yourself. You need to learn to live with what you've done, to become someone who could never make those choices again. Do you think that's possible? Ray paused with his hand on the door handle. I think people can change if they want it badly enough. Whether you want to change enough to do the hard work of becoming someone different, that's up to you. As Ray left the facility, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. Uncertainty about his own choices. Had his systematic destruction of Brenda's life been justice? Or had it been revenge disguised as justice? Had he protected his children? Or had he taught them that mercy was weakness? That evening, Ray sat with Danny and Lily in the new tree house, watching the sun set through the branches of the old maple tree. How is Mom? Lily asked. She's sick, sweetheart. Very sad and very sorry for what she did. Danny looked at his father intently. Do you believe her? Ray considered the question carefully. I believe she's sorry now. Whether she would have been sorry if she hadn't been caught, if her plan had worked, that's something we'll never know. Are you going to help her? Lily asked. Ray looked at his daughter, this child who still believed in the possibility of redemption even after being betrayed by her own mother. I'm going to let her get the help she needs. That's not the same as helping her myself, but it's not trying to hurt her either. Danny nodded slowly. So we're not going to be a family again, but we're not going to be enemies either. That's right, son. As they climbed down from the treehouse and walked back to the house, Ray realized that his children were teaching him something important. Danny had learned to set boundaries, to protect himself from further harm while not carrying hatred in his heart. Lily had learned to extend compassion without being naive about human nature. Perhaps there was wisdom in their approach, a middle ground between the blind trust he'd once offered and the cold revenge he'd embraced. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 2 years after Brenda's suicide attempt, Ray stood in his backyard watching Danny teach Lily how to use a circular saw. His son, now 18 and preparing for college, had developed into a remarkable young man, strong, principled, and capable of both setting boundaries and showing compassion. The treehouse had become the centerpiece of their backyard, a testament to the family's ability to rebuild something beautiful from the wreckage of betrayal. But more than that, it had become a symbol of the lessons they'd all learned about trust, forgiveness, and the complexity of human nature. Ray's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Reeves. Brenda has been discharged from our facility. She's requested your contact information to send a letter. May I provide it? Ray stared at the message for a long moment. Brenda had spent nearly 2 years in psychiatric treatment, first as an inpatient and then in a structured outpatient program. According to Dr. Reeves' periodic updates, she had made significant progress in understanding and taking responsibility for her actions. Ray typed back, yes, you may provide it. 3 days later, an envelope arrived in Ray's mailbox. His name and address were written in Brenda's familiar handwriting, but the penmanship was different, steadier, more careful, as if each letter had been considered before being written. That evening, after Danny and Lily were asleep, Ray sat in his study and opened the letter. Dear Ray, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you choose not to read this. But my therapist says that making amends, real amends, not just apologies, is part of my recovery, and I wanted to try to do that properly. First, I want you to know that I've spent the last 2 years learning who I really was when I destroyed our family. I was a selfish, manipulative person who convinced herself that her happiness mattered more than her children's security. I was someone who could look at the beautiful thing our son had created and destroy it to serve my own agenda. I was someone who could plan to drug and frame the man who had given me everything, just because I was bored with the life we'd built together. I am not writing to make excuses or to ask for forgiveness. I am writing to tell you that I understand the full scope of what I did, and I accept that the consequences I faced were entirely of my own making. I want you to know that I think about Danny and Lily every day, not in a way that causes me pain. My therapist has helped me learn the difference between healthy grief and self-destructive guilt, but in a way that reminds me of what I had and what I chose to throw away. I hope they are happy. I hope they are learning to trust again. I hope they know that their mother's failures don't reflect anything wrong with them. I also want you to know that I understand why you did what you did after you discovered my betrayal. For a long time, I was angry about how thoroughly you destroyed my life. I felt like you were cruel, vindictive, excessive in your revenge. But I understand now that you were protecting our children from someone who had proven she would sacrifice their well-being for her own desires. You were making sure that someone who had betrayed her family's trust couldn't do it again. I'm not the same person who planned to destroy you 2 years ago. I work now at a women's shelter, helping other women who have made destructive choices learn to rebuild their lives. I live simply in a small apartment with no desire for the excitement or drama that once seemed so appealing. I have learned to find peace in being alone with myself, something I was never able to do before. I don't expect anything from you, Ray. I don't expect forgiveness, reconciliation, or even acknowledgement of this letter. I am writing because I needed you to know that the person who hurt you and our children is gone. Whether the person who remains is worthy of anything more than your indifference is not for me to judge. I hope you and the children have found happiness. I hope the life you've built without me is everything our family could have been if I had been strong enough to choose love over selfishness. With respect and genuine remorse, Brenda. Ray read the letter twice, then set it on his desk and stared out the window at the treehouse illuminated by the back porch light. The woman who had written this letter seemed like a different person from the one who had destroyed Danny's project and planned to frame Ray for domestic violence. But was the change real, or was this simply a more sophisticated form of manipulation? The next morning, Ray showed the letter to Lisa over coffee at their usual diner. "What do you think?" he asked after she'd read it. Lisa folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "I think she sounds different, more self-aware, less focused on what she wants, and more focused on taking responsibility for what she did. But you know as well as I do that people can learn to say the right things without really changing. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk of finding out which this is." Ray tucked the letter into his jacket pocket. "What would you do?" Lisa smiled. "I'd probably do exactly what you're going to do. Proceed with extreme caution, protect your children above all else, and see if her actions match her words over time." That evening, Ray shared the letter with Danny and Lily. Both children read it carefully, their faces showing a mixture of emotions. "She sounds different," Lily observed. "Sadder, but also, I don't know, more real." Danny was more skeptical. "It's a nice letter, Dad, but letters are just words. What matters is what someone does." Ray nodded. "What do you both think about me responding to her?" Lily looked up hopefully. "Are you going to?" "I'm considering it, but I want to know how you two feel about that." Danny was quiet for a long moment. I think it's okay to acknowledge that she's trying to change, but I don't think we should make it easy for her. She needs to prove that she's really different, not just sorry." "And how would she do that?" "By staying away from us until she's really sure she's changed. By building a life that shows she's learned from her mistakes. By not asking for anything from us while she's still figuring out who she wants to be." Ray looked at his son with pride. Danny had learned to be both compassionate and wise, to leave room for the possibility of change while protecting himself from further harm. 3 days later, Ray wrote his response. "Brenda, I received your letter and appreciate the thought you put into it. Your words suggest that you have gained insight into the person you were and the choices you made. I hope that insight leads to lasting change. Danny and Lily are both doing well. They are strong, resilient young people who have learned valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and the importance of consistency between words and actions. They know that their mother's failures don't define them, and they are building lives based on integrity and genuine care for others. I cannot offer you forgiveness that is not mine to give or withhold, but rather something that may or may not develop naturally over time based on how you choose to live your life going forward. What I can offer is indifference to your past and cautious hope for your future. If your change is real, if you have truly become someone who puts others' well-being ahead of your own desires, then you have my respect for doing the hard work of transformation. If this is simply a more sophisticated attempt at manipulation, then you will find that I am no more susceptible to it now than I was before. Live well, Brenda. Build a life that reflects the person you claim to have become. And if, years from now, your actions have consistently matched the sentiment in your letter, perhaps we can have a different kind of conversation. Ray. Ray sealed the letter and mailed it that same day. As he drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over 2 years, a sense of closure. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Lily asked a question that surprised him. Daddy, do you think you've changed since everything happened with Mommy? Ray considered the question carefully. Yes, sweetheart. I think I have. Ow! I became harder, more suspicious, less willing to trust people. In some ways, that was necessary to protect our family. But in other ways, it made me less than I wanted to be. Danny looked up from his plate. Do you think that was wrong? Ray met his son's eyes. I think it was necessary at the time. But I also think it's time to find a balance between protecting ourselves and remaining open to the possibility that people can change. 6 months later, Ray received a Christmas card for Brenda. Inside was a simple message. Thank you for your letter. I am still working to become someone worthy of the family I lost. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. There was no return address, no request for contact, no expectation of response. It was simply acknowledgement of the season and a reaffirmation of her commitment to change. Ray showed the card to Danny and Lily, who read it without comment. Then Lily did something that surprised him. She took the card and placed it on the mantel next to the other Christmas cards they'd received. She's still our mother, Lily explained when Ray raised an eyebrow. Even if she's not part of our family anymore. That night, as Ray tucked his daughter into bed, she asked him one final question that would stay with him for years to come. Daddy, if someone really changes, if they become a completely different person than they were when they hurt you, do you think they deserve a chance to show that they're different? Ray looked down at his 9-year-old daughter, this child who had somehow maintained her capacity for hope despite everything she'd witnessed. I think, sweetheart, that everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were. But I also think that the people they hurt have the right to protect themselves while that person is learning to change. And most importantly, I think actions matter more than words, and it takes a long time to prove that change is real. Lily nodded solemnly. So maybe someday, if Mommy really is different, we could be friends? Not a family again, but not enemies either. Ray kissed his daughter's forehead. Maybe, Lily. Maybe. As Ray turned off the lights and closed Lily's door, he realized that his children had taught him something profound about the nature of justice, mercy, and the complexity of human relationships. They had learned to set boundaries without building walls, to protect themselves without losing their capacity for compassion, to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. Ray walked out to the backyard and looked up at the treehouse, this symbol of his family's resilience and ability to rebuild. The structure was strong, beautiful, and built to last. But more importantly, it had been built with love, patience, and the wisdom that comes from learning hard lessons about trust and betrayal. In the end, Ray realized that was the best revenge of all, not the destruction of his enemies, but the construction of something better from the ruins they had left behind. His children were growing into remarkable human beings. His own character had been tested and refined, and their family had emerged stronger from the crucible of betrayal. Brenda and Trevor had tried to destroy Detective Ray Holloway and his family. Instead, they had forged them into something unbreakable. As Ray walked back toward his house, he felt the cold calculation that had driven him for so long finally beginning to thaw. Perhaps it was time to become someone new again, Not the naively trusting man he'd been before Brenda's betrayal, and not the coldly vengeful man he'd become afterward, but someone who combined the wisdom of both experiences. Someone who could protect his family without losing his soul. Someone who could demand justice without abandoning mercy. Someone who could learn from betrayal without being consumed by it. Ray Holloway had survived the destruction of his marriage, the betrayal of his trust, and the systematic assault on everything he'd built. More than that, he had emerged from the experience as a better father, a stronger man, and a wiser human being. The treehouse stood as testament to his family's resilience. But the man who looked up at it that night was testament to something even more important: the human capacity to be transformed by suffering without being destroyed by it. The reckoning was complete. The man who remained was exactly who he chose to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.